Good morning, everyone. I hope yous are keeping okay. As you know, we're doing a wee mini-series at the minute on the different names that God is known by. And Andy and Carol asked me if I'd like to do a meditation. So I had a look at the list, and the name that jumped out at me, I don't know if I picked it or it picked me, was Yahweh Rapha, or Jehovah Rapha. That's R-A-P-H-A, and that actually means the Lord who heals. Jehovah is Lord, and Rapha, to heal, the Lord who heals. And Jehovah Rapha is first mentioned in the Bible in Exodus, whenever the Israelites had fled out of Egypt. And they wandered in the desert for 3 days, the desert of Sur, and they needed water to drink. And they couldn't find any water. And then when they did come across a river, the water was bitter or contaminated. And they called the river Mara, because Mara means bitter. And of course they couldn't drink the water. They grumbled to Moses, and Moses prayed to God. And God told Moses to throw a piece of wood into the water, which he did, and the water became sweet and cleansed, and the Israelites were able to quench their thirst. And in those scriptures in Exodus 15 and verse 26, when God first reveals himself as the God who heals, he says, which I think is absolutely a lovely verse, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians. That would be the 10 plagues. For I am the Lord who heals. Jehovah Rapha. And I wasn't familiar with a lot of the stories in the Old Testament, but I had a look through, and there's so many stories about God healing. As you know, the Israelites, they defied God, and God would have sent plagues or diseases on them, but he always ended up healing them. As children, he always ended up looking after them as a father would. And I've just picked out a few from the Old Testament. And the first one is from 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 10, and it's physically healed when God healed Naaman of leprosy. The second one is Psalm 34 verse 18, and that's emotional healing. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit, which I think sounds absolutely beautiful. It could probably be emotional or physical. And in Daniel 4 verse 34, Nebuchadnezzar says to the Lord, again, I think this is a lovely verse. I'll just read it to you now. This is Daniel 4 verse 34. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes to heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honoured and glorified him who lives forever. I just think that's a beautiful verse, and why wouldn't you praise and honour God if he restored your sanity to you? I don't know if you or anyone you know have been healed yourself, if you've attended any of our healing services in church. You know, we have an intercessor group, which is just a small group of people that meet, and we pray for different people, different age groups from all different backgrounds. And I just want to share this with you before I go on to the New Testament. We had a lady who came to our last healing service in church, and she had pain at the side of her face, and she'd been to her doctor, her GP, and they thought it was maybe a couple of things, but they weren't really sure what caused it, and they prescribed medication for her. And on the scale of 1 to 10, her pain would have been 12. And she came to the last healing service in church, and got prayed on and are prayed for, and her pain now is 3. Now I think that's a miracle, a modern day miracle, that her pain has went from 12 down to 3, and that only happened after she was prayed for at the healing service. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you, and if you'd like to go, or anyone you know would like to attend the healing service, come along. They're once a month on a Thursday. They're very private. Your business isn't known. They're very private. A nice quiet service. You just be prayed for, and I'm not saying you're going to be physically healed, or your friend or whoever, but why not give it a try? I firmly believe God, Jesus, still does a lot of healing on this earth today. We just maybe don't hear about it as much. Anyway, I'll go on now to the New Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus is Jehovah Rapha. Jesus' ministry in Galilee was spent going from town to town, healing people, physically, spiritually, body, mind and spirit. He healed them. And in the New Testament, right away in the first Gospel in Matthew actually says of Jesus, he himself took on all our infirmities and bore our sickness. And right away in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 8 verses 1 to 4, a leper is healed. Jesus heals a leper. Again in Matthew chapter 8, he heals Peter's mother-in-law from a physical illness. In Mark's Gospel, Mark 2 verses 5 to 12, a paralysed man is healed. And in Luke's Gospel, Luke 17 verses 11 to 17, 10 lepers are healed. These are all physical healings that Jesus done on his time on earth, his time amongst us. And one of my favourite stories about the healing is when Jesus healed the woman who bled for 12 years. So obviously she had visited doctors, maybe if they had faith, healers in those days, and she still wasn't cured. And Jesus, whenever I read a verse, I like to ruminate on it, and I always imagine Jesus' ministry had been well known maybe at that time, and when people knew he was coming to their town to heal, they would have flocked in to see him, maybe have a chance to touch him or to speak to him. She couldn't even get that close to him because there were so many people crowding around him, and she managed to touch the very hem of his robe, and she was healed. And the bit about that story that I love the most is it wasn't like a face-to-face healing. She touched Jesus's robe, the hem of his robe, and you can just imagine Jesus must have felt his power, his healing power going out of him, and he knew someone had touched him. And I love at the end of it when he turns round and asks the disciples, who touched me? And the disciples don't know because there's so many people around. They don't know who has touched the Lord. And at the end of that story, it's in Luke. I'm just trying to find what chapter it is. I just can't see it here. But anyway, it's in Luke. But at the end, he turns round. The woman comes forward when Jesus says, who touched me? She comes forward trembling. You can imagine she's going to be frightened. And Jesus said to her, by your faith you are healed, daughter. Go in peace. I think that's a lovely story. But anyway, it's time for me to go now. I hope you've enjoyed. It's a very short reflection. But if you are interested in any stories of healing and just want to reflect on them, There are lots in the Old and New Testament. I hope you enjoyed that. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, bye for now.